strategies because because we all come from really under-resourced communities, and it really did make sense for us to form in the Mountain Plains area for a lot of reasons. We have a shared culture, we had a shared geography, we have shared collateral types. Many of us have a lot of different trust land statuses that we're trying to move into leverage positions, like with small business lending, mortgage lending, or even some consumer lending and ag lending. And so that was our main reason why we were born. And we ultimately developed a strategic plan in 2020 towards the beginning. And we sort of just use those to guide us for the next few years. So I guess I'll stop there because I'll talk more about it, but that's pretty much a brief history of the coalition.
Did you mention what states Mountain Plains?
Oh, I didn't. I just assume everybody knows Mountain Plains. So currently it is made up of South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and then we have looked at North Dakota a little bit, but haven't been able to mobilize those CDFIs up in that region. But if there's anybody on the call, I'd love for them to reach out. So.
Awesome. Cool. Amber, do you want to go next?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amber Feist. I'm actually an enrolled citizen with the Coquille Indian tribe from Southern Coastal Oregon, but I'm here serving in my capacity as the Technical Assistance Program Manager for the Oregon Native American Chamber. We are a 501c3 currently located in Portland, Oregon, but we are currently expanding into the Northwest region. And part of our collective work has kind of brought us into other regions. I think I'll be speaking of our coalition, the RISE Collective, which was funded by Wells Fargo's Open for Business grant in 2021. And the really reason and mission, the reason that we kind of all came together was to serve businesses that were kind of outside of the traditional urban areas. A lot of us were operating and had great connections to agencies and grant funders here in our urban areas, but throughout the pandemic, we were finding that our Native entrepreneurs and Latinx entrepreneurs in rural areas were really having a difficult time accessing those funds. So at the heart of the collective was to really bring not only financial resources, but also technical assistance resources to businesses all across the state of Oregon.
Thank you. Tani, last but not least. You're muted.
I'm never the first at that, honestly, and it's sorry about that. So thank you for having me, I was saying, and I think this is this whole panel is great evidence of the power in collective engagement. You know what I mean? All of us working together, which especially as Native CDFIs, I think we've been known to do. And so the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition was started back in 2013, and it was really focused around the lack of home ownership in our tribal communities and our Native communities in South Dakota to begin with. To be honest, it was focused mostly on the very few 502 direct home loans that were being made in Indian country in South Dakota. And that is because it was Elsie Meeks was the South Dakota State Rural Development Director at the time. And she was appalled, to be honest, at the very minimal numbers of 502s being done. And the 502, of course, is the mortgage loan product that was created specifically for trust land, and yet severely underutilized. And so it was really around that brought us all together. And of course, I remember the first meeting back in June. It was probably almost exactly 9 years ago already. Time flies when you're having fun. where it was a whole room full of individuals and organizations and agencies and tribal governments who were all interested in one thing, and that was how to increase home ownership in our Native communities in South Dakota. And so really it was from that first gathering that I think the one thing the coalition did right from the very beginning is identify the barriers. What are the barriers to home ownership for our Native families? And really just with the right people in the room, ranging from state and tribal agencies to TDHEs to Native and non-Native CDFIs, other nonprofits. We had some lenders in the room, and really just everyone providing that feedback. What do we see as the barriers to home ownership? And the fact that we didn't stop there, that it wasn't just the barriers. Well, what are the solutions? And then through the working of all of us coming together to work collectively, we really identified there are so many barriers, obviously, whether it's lack of housing stock or the lack of mortgage lenders or the lack of mortgage loan capital. All of those things really kind of led us to create 5 working committees, which are still leading this coalition forward. And so with that, then we're super happy that we're still going strong and lots of work to do, although there's been lots of progress. So I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Thank you, Tawny. So now we'll just open it up, and we're gonna talk a little bit about like successes, specific successes and things in a minute. But first, to get kind of into the nitty gritty of this, data collection process in a collective, it's a lot of capacity enough just for one single organization to collect data and report on data and kind of tell that story. So I think it'd be helpful for those in the room to hear how your coalitions, your collectives have managed this kind of shared data collection process and reporting process. How have you made that happen? How did you decide what to collect and kind of the processes that went into that? Any advice and things that you have for folks? So I don't know, Lakota, do you want to start again?
Yeah, that sounds good. We are not as far along in the data collection, like actual selecting which outcomes and outputs are necessary. But I think I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we know are important. And we understand part of the frustration of our experience in the world and society has been that a lot of the numbers and statistics detailing our experiences or our societal positioning within our communities are not disputed, right? We all know the reality all too well. But many of us are just beyond accepting the numerical realities that were sort of given to us through the census and through all the other data collection methods. And we know that just looking at those numbers doesn't represent the validity of the picture of our communities, right? So, and then unfortunately, the data that does exist that's out there, policies are set based off of that data. So we knew that as a coalition going in. And what we've done so far is we've sort of formalized around a strategic plan. So we know what those strategies are. And each of us collectively know our own experiences, and we want to honor those experiences within our respective 9 Native CDFIs that are operating in this Mountain Plains Regional CDFI Coalition. So one of the big things we just sort of talk about are the MPS ratios that used to be utilized by the CDFI fund, just to understand organizational health, because what our coalition is really about executive leadership, skill building, as well as building out that peer-to-peer network for our loan officers to talk to each other or our credit coaches to talk to each other. But as far as creating a standardization of outcomes and output collection, we haven't taken a broad step to say these are the data points that'll show progress for ourselves and move our coalition forward. But what we are doing is talking about each of us. We're doing a scan of like each of us and what we're all collecting. And so we meet twice a week We meet on Mondays and Wednesdays. So it's a lot of conversation, but we are doing that scan now to see what data points are being collected, because we applied for the EDA Build Back Better opportunity as a coalition to get some funds into the region. And one of the big things we asked Sweetgrass Consulting to do was a regional market study for us. And in a short amount of time, like 2 months, a 65-page document was produced to sort of show what's going on with the regional market and how we as native CDFIs can, either find a niche within that spot or how we are currently serving that market. So we've got this baseline 65-page regional market study that hopefully then we can move into standardizing some data points across the region. But I think what the whole point of what we stand up for is saying we want the communities and each native CDFI to have their own data points to tell their own story. And collectively we can grab those and make, and do better about storytelling. But we aren't quite there yet. We're, 2.5 years old. So we're getting there and we understand the importance of it. But I just wanted to present the beginner stage of data collection to everybody. So.
Yeah, that's super helpful, Lakota. And especially with you all being a newer group, I want to make sure now that you're, working out these things as you go, it's good to highlight some of this like beginning process stuff and what y'all are going through, and some of the unexpected things that may be happening that are going really well that you want to share versus things you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of a lot. We didn't really, expect that bump in the road type of thing. So it's exciting that you all are working through that and collectively determining that as a group. Meanwhile, still holding on to your individual and organizational goals. So
cool.
Yeah. Amber?
Yeah, and I want to echo, I think what you're saying is, no matter what kind of database or strategic plan you build around how you're going to collect that data, it's always a work in progress. It's always going to be changing and adapting. It's not something that you can just like set it and forget it, because no matter what your intentions are and how you build it, the realities of how you're telling those stories and new funding sources and what they require are always going to be constants. And so for our collective and for our organization, we really wanted to build a database that kind of sat outside of what our funders were requiring of us. We had a city agency that had us using a very complex database that they were collecting and storing. Let me see. Let me see if I can mess with my. Oh, can you guys hear me now? I'll speak up. Okay. So we were working with a city agency, and what we began to discover was that whatever we put into this database about the private enterprises, about the businesses, that became city data, and it belonged to them, and they could really use it however either they wanted or it was called upon, as an external audit. And so we became a little bit more I think intentional about how we were entering data into this database and what we were collecting and what we were sharing and what we were kind of holding back in terms of what we needed to be able to have accurate data and information on tribal economies in Oregon. And so we partnered with Sweetgrass, which sounds like it's a recurring theme here, to help us create our own database from an outcome tracker software. So the software that we have been using is Outcome Tracker. And I think here in Oregon, it's what is used for a lot of different other reporting agencies. And so the import export of the data that we were collecting, it seemed to be the most simple to kind of go with that software. I will say, it's not perfect. I don't think anybody has met the perfect data collection software, or if you have, please let me know. But what I really wanted to do as we were, creating this software and as we were going to be requiring partners to use it, or at least put data into our existing system, was to create something that, identified businesses less about kind of those traditional number of employees, revenue, indicators, traditional economic indicators that, we wanted to look at the full picture. We wanted to look at, if the business was able to, support themselves and their families, were they hiring community members? Do they have their traditional values incorporated into their businesses? Are they meeting the needs of their tribal communities in some way? We wanted to be able to tell those stories in addition to kind of those traditional stories. And just kind of, like in the decision of what we were going to collect, I think we took from a lot of the different funding sources and what they were requiring a lot of the smaller nonprofits to report on. And we combined that with that kind of other perspective of what success looks like. What types of indicators beyond those traditional ones show us when businesses are having success in their lives. And so we wanted to be sure to include all of those and have, not only, the Native lens on it, but also, a lens from other communities of color as well, because a lot of the collectives that we do and a lot of the partnerships that we have are with organizations from all communities of color. And so, we kind of serve as a baseline, but we're always adapting, we're always changing, and we're always ensuring that as we are building these systems, that they're accessible and hopefully not too rigorous for some of our smaller organizational partners to use.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber. Connie?
Right. So the coalition, the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition, has been at this, the data tracking and trying to measure impact since the beginning, really. And I think we've been working with Sweetgrass from the very beginning. And it's been a kind of a curvy path, like most of the things we do, right? So it seems like if the coalition's mission really is just flat out to increase home ownership in our Native communities, that it may be just as easy as that, right? To be being able to track the number of new Native homeowners in South Dakota. And yet it's because we know the process, the path to home ownership is so complicated and there are so many steps. It starts many times, years in advance, with not only doing things like, being aware of the home mortgage process and what is a home mortgage loan and basic financial literacy. So we know that maybe one indicator of us, getting closer towards helping families achieve home ownership could be tracked through the number of trainings we're doing. How about the organizations who are new to the coalition and helping pursue home ownership in their communities or helping their Native families pursue home ownership? How many organizations, have staff that need that certification to be able to teach the financial literacy and the homebuyer education, and now pathways or post-purchase and foreclosure prevention more recently. So one thing that seemed so easy is now got several different branches, right? Where we're also needing to track the number of families trained, individuals trained, but also the number of organizations with certified instructors. And so another, kind of part of home ownership is around accessing the land and the housing stock. And what do we know it takes to increase the housing stock in any of our Native communities? Many times it starts with the contractors and building their capacity. And so we're tracking things like the success of our capacity building for those contractors around the construction internship program. We're tracking the support of all of these efforts through different funding sources. So it's just been really messy, honestly. And Alyssa knows this firsthand because she's been working with us for so long, that I feel like the coalition has done a good job at, first of all, realizing the importance of being able to track the impacts. But I think what is a moving target is, what are those impacts? What are those key indicators? What do we need to be changing all of the time as the coalition grows and kind of the member organizations are maturing? I feel like some of those impacts are changing, or what we want to measure is changing as well. And I know, for one example, is now we have more Native CDFIs who are pursuing mortgage lending. Forbearance, for example, Lakota Federal Credit Union is new to the mortgage lending. We need to be tracking a little bit more than to really benefit them. And one of the changes we talked about at our recent tribal site visit in Flanders, South Dakota, was the need to be tracking the dollar amounts of loan capital available for mortgage lending, because that's important to our member organizations, obviously. And so it is a moving target, but I think it's a good sign that we're not just happy sticking with the same old data sets and impacts. We're always looking at making those changes. Alyssa, you can speak to this firsthand, the challenges, even once you've identified the data that you want to be collecting. We use Salesforce, the challenges getting our member coalitions or member CDFIs and coalition members to do that reporting. You can come up with all of these key things that you want to track, and everybody agrees, well, how good would it be for us to be able to identify the successes here by measuring this, and yet nobody wants to do the report. So that's a challenge, and we all know how busy everybody is or whatever, but yeah, it's a never ending battle basically, but I feel like by continuing to make the effort, we'll get there.
Can I, as a member of the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition, I think one of the things that it does well is use it as a carrot also. So like the coalition has a ton of resources and it's constantly fundraising for unique different aspects of homeownership throughout the state. And so if you want access to participate in a specific, break off group or something, they usually say, is your data complete and is it up to date? And, then it's sort of, not that it's a barrier, but it's just like, it helps you, reminds you to get it in so that you can participate in this next level of best things. And I do think that that's a best practice, Tani, that you guys are doing. It keeps us motivated and on time to do things like that. And I think that's unique. I've never seen that done so well and so respectfully, I guess, as a coalition. So
absolutely. So thank you, Lakota, for adding that. And just give you an example, the tribal site visit that we hosted a couple of weeks ago, then one of the carrots is that the travel stipend we offer for our member organizations who are current on their reporting. We offer the ability to reimburse for some of the travel for them to attend events, etc. The other thing that we're trying to promote more, I'm pretty excited about, is the fact that our member organizations are eligible for a specific impact report just on their organization. And I don't know, Alyssa, that we've had many organizations actually take us up on that opportunity, but what a cool thing to think that we'd have a customized report showing that organization's, impacts and progress in achieving home ownership or whatever they're doing, to be able to present that to your boards or to, use it in their fundraising efforts. So that's something we're promoting, and hopefully we'll get some takers on it.
Yeah, thank you all for adding to that conversation. I think it's important to note those couple best practices that the coalition has been doing. They've been doing this for a long time, and connecting that sense of ownership, right, of the data and being like, yes, we're asking for it. But unlike a funder or a typical kind of organization may ask you for data, like this is still yours. And if you want to ask us for what you've reported on and it be in like a prettier format, that's something that the coalition has done. You know, as long as folks are entering data, of course, like, you know, they can pull their own reports and stuff. So, and then also connecting that data collection kind of accountability, right, with the opportunities that the coalition offers, which Tani will talk about in a minute, some of the opportunities that they offer. So I don't know if Amber, if you wanted to add anything related to this kind of barrier or some lessons learned that have been seen with getting collective or coalition members to report, and maybe some ways that you've, you know, you all are fairly new too, but some ways that you've started to navigate that or considered kind of next steps.
Yeah, I'm actually maybe getting a little bit of a lesson here, which I love, but I think we have tried to use our data collection similarly as a carrot, but it's also, you know, when we, and I believe, I'm not sure if there's, I've seen Amy or Casey Pearl and Amber Schultz Oliver, but you know, we go into a lot of partnerships and shared grants whenever we are doing technical assistance, and we always want to involve the communities that we're seeking to serve and partners that can better serve the communities. And so I think the database is always a part of those partnership agreements and MOUs, but I think, you know, having it as more of a carrot, as more of an opportunity, and describing it as such has been a barrier and a challenge because of, you know, what can be considered an administrative burden to the staff to have to fill out or, you know, kind of require it of their clients, especially when, you know, especially during times of crisis like the pandemic, when everybody is just overwhelmed and overburdened with so many things going on. And so it has been a barrier for us, but we've had really great response so long as we are offering not only technical assistance to our entrepreneurs, but also to our partnership organizations and how to navigate those, you know, if they get behind and they need help catching up, you know, we offer staff support, we offer time with Alyssa and Sweetgrass, and we really try to, you know, provide that assistance fully. And, you know, yeah, I'm interested to learn more about how to offer it as a carrot, as, you know, hey, this is important too. And the way that you're collecting your data and making sure your data is complete can help you develop these beautiful reports that will ensure, you know, you and your fundraising efforts will be more successful as well.
Awesome. There was something in the chat, and we have time before we talk about some bigger stories of success and things that you all have experienced or hope to have. I think just quickly, if each of you could go around, and I know Mountain Plains, you all are starting to work on this, but what CRM you use, your data collection system, and kind of what you like about it, what you don't like, and if there's anything you can share with folks about what you use.
Yeah, we have everybody, it's the same situation with all the different loan softwares that are out there that CDFIs use. So everything from T to Down Home to Otis. But what we're trying to do is use the same report that we all do, like report to the CDFI fund, the TLR, that type of stuff. So some of the best practices that you're hearing my colleagues talk about in their coalitions, we're trying to adopt as well, to take somewhere that this data is already being reported to and ask permission to, you know, utilize that data besides creating a new form. Currently, what we're doing is using Google Sheets, you know, a place for all of us to enter our data to, and that's the CRM at this point, but we're hoping to be more advanced, you know, as things come along. So.
Okay, so we use our CRM for the data collection piece would be Salesforce. But the challenge, just like Lakota said, I mean, everybody's got a ton of reports to do already, and some of us are using Salesforce to already track things like number of classes and number of attendees, the kind of the TA hours and that kind of thing. I guess what I would love to see is some ability for us to be able to import the reports that our member organizations are already entering into Salesforce, into the coalition's data collection efforts. So that's, I don't know that we use anything else, to be honest. I don't think we do.
There's kind of a front-facing survey tool
Mhm.
that was created for the coalition. Just a little bit of a easier tool that a lot of people are using. It's kind of like a Survey Monkey type of thing called Form Assembly. And yeah, so that's what the coalition is. But Salesforce is the CRM. It was a way of trying to make the reporting a little more accessible and easy to use. And so then that kind of survey tool is linked to Salesforce. All of the data gets entered in that survey from the practitioners, and then yeah, it funnels into Salesforce, and we're able to filter reports and dashboards from that based on, you know, time period or an organization, or I think we've even made a couple for like reservations. So yeah. And Amber, you already mentioned that you all use Outcome Tracker, but do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with that? You used it with another kind of another collective that you all were a part of as well. So kind of what your experience has been, you leading your own kind of umbrella, you know, network for this hub of data collection, but then you've also been a participant, right? You've also been like a member of someone's collective data system. So maybe just a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah, so Outcome Tracker, I'm not sure how familiar people are with, but it's, you know, again, one that we were a part of under the city of Portland, with Prosper Portland. We took what we thought they were doing well and created our own umbrella, which is being used by, I think, 4 or 5 different Native serving organizations here in the state of Oregon. And really, it was kind of meant as a great way for us to share information on clients. So, you know, if a client came to NCFS, the Yahweh Community Financial Services, and was looking for maybe a business loan, but then they did a one program, a business development program that they went through with one of our facilitators, and then we were able to then help that client access, you know, maybe it's legal resources or setting up a chart of accounts, a bookkeeper, and all of that story of that client's journey is all held within that one database. And so as the Native entrepreneur is kind of going from organization to organization and is getting services, we're able to really see that full picture in one field. And that's what we really liked about Outcome Tracker. But there's also a component of project management. And so we have also implemented Asana. And I think we've used that as kind of a bridge for what Outcome Tracker can't do for us in terms of tracking the professional service provider projects that are ongoing, the dollar amounts that we're spending in different services for entrepreneurs. And then we too use Google. I think that it's just one of the more accessible you know, pieces of software that, you know, other organizations can use. And so when you need to have a spreadsheet or when you need to have a document that it's really easy to share. We are very intentional about keeping private data in Outcome Tracker behind firewall and password protection. We don't want any of that information in Google. We don't want any of that information potentially finding its way out. And so it has been kind of interesting to figure out, you know, how to get, you know, the data from people's spreadsheets into our system without kind of, you know, compromising that. So it has been kind of a learning process for us, and what works, what doesn't work, and how we can make sure that we're, you know, doing the best that we can.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And I wanted to open it up just for anyone who wants to start entering things in the chat, of course, questions, but also just if you're part of a collective or your organization is looking to, you know, create some sort of a coalition or collective, if you have questions or some best practices or lessons learned that you want to share, definitely share those amongst the group as well through the chat, and we can, you know, probably have an open discussion about it near the end. So, okay, I think now we'll talk a little bit more about what are some, examples of success and impact that the collective has had, or, and or has hoped to have. We know that a lot of this kind of collective coalition movement is becoming much more widespread, either amongst, states or regions, even bigger than that, right, with like NCN and everything. And so we know there's a lot of, benefits to that. And whether that's, policy and advocacy, or in some cases, some good capacity building opportunities, streamlining resource navigation amongst the group. So it would be good to hear from everyone what some examples of success and impact that you've been able to have through this collective, and how you were able to, use your data to get there. And of course, Mountain Plains, you all being pretty new, you can talk a little bit too about maybe some of the surprising things that came out of this kind of shared market study effort that you think will have a lot of potential impact, and what you hope to see from the, Build Back Better and everything.
Sure, I'm gonna quickly share screen, Alyssa. So I just wanted to kind of frame this. It's easier for me to look at it and talk about it so people know we're a little more organized than I've came off in my presentation. But I think that the whole point of what we're doing is really systems change. So it is harder to talk about the different outputs and outcomes that we can get individually. And we serve the organizations. We don't serve the customers, the ultimate recipients of the CDFIs, right? We're not as concerned about that data. We want to support the CDFIs in developing their own outcomes measurement tools. But what we did here is really come up with this holistic framework. And if you notice, the strategic actions really are amplify strength, unify action, and sustain generations. And each one of those will have a different sort of work plan associated with it, with what we're hoping to achieve. So in the first year of operating the coalition, the Amplify Strength really was about grabbing each of the native CDFIs, grabbing the executive leadership and saying, what are you doing well, and sharing that across the region so that we don't have to, reinvent the wheel. And so if we would talk about the different systems improvements that each of us have made because we have a weekly connection with our peer over in Montana, that would grow, right? So I do need to probably find a narrative to talk about the actual numerical value of what that's done for the organization. But on the individual level, we know we have each deployed 3 times the amount that we normally have. And whether that can be directly attributed to the coalition or not, we haven't taken that step to I guess take credit for that as a coalition, but we're just really proud of our partnering organizations in the region, that we are proud that each one of us have been able to successfully deploy 3 times more than we normally had right prior to this. There's lots of reasons for that, including the environment watershed moment for CDFIs, et cetera. So it's hard for us as a coalition just to singularly take credit for that, but it's something that did happen. And then the Unify Action was really just all of us coming together and applying for the Build Back Better opportunity, which, in the call out in the NOFA, they did ask for a regional presentation of a regional solution. And we really felt like we were fit for that because we are unlike most of the applicants within that space, and we weren't created because of Build Back Better. We were already a functioning coalition, ready and just poised, ready to take advantage of any opportunity that came our way. And this did happen. And so we made it past phase 1, which there was 500 some applicants, and we're moving into phase 2, made it past the first phase of review. And we're told that we're in the second phase now for questioning. But really excited about that opportunity, which it is going to bring if we get funded at the full level, it will bring $47 million to the region through EDA, which is pretty big. And then beyond that, we're hoping to just sustain some of the systems change that we could mobilize within that. But we wanted to build on sort of deconstruct what collectives normally do. And it's not we're not even a formal institution. We're not a 501c3. We're not seeking a 501c3. We're just trying to overcome that demand that we all feel and face from funders of saying, what scale? What does scale look like to you? Well, scale looks like me partnering with my neighbor over in Montana or Wyoming, and we're doing the same thing. And if you can just pass it through one of us, we don't care which one of us, it's reciprocal leadership, pass it through one of us, and we'll share it throughout the region to get the level of scale that most funders are looking for, right? And it'll also change the narrative of our region if we can all do that together. So it's not as detailed oriented as we want it to be, I think, and we'll get there eventually. But I did want to just share this quick thing about where we're at. We do have a plan. We're just we're more focused on the systems change and seeing what we can do with the Build Back Better right now. So let me stop sharing and pass it on to somebody else.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Lakota. It's good to hear more about your goals, and seeing that visual, I think, is super helpful. So, Amber, do you want to talk a little bit about what have been some of the successes so far with the collective, and maybe some anticipated successes that you all will be able to have with this effort?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, ONAC's been a progressive leader in development and facilitation of several coalitions. And I think, where we've really been successful is bringing together diverse organizations and stakeholders to, increase the amount of dollars that are really meant for the response and delivery of technical assistance to Native communities, underserved populations, and other communities of color. So I've talked a lot about RISE Collective, but ONAC has also been in partnership with the Community Chamber Coalition of Oregon, which has representation from, I think, 5 communities of color. And through, our advocacy work and, the response during the COVID crisis in 2020, we were able to secure over $3 million in technical assistance and direct services for businesses in the state of Oregon. And then in 2021, through our partnership and work with Business Oregon, we were able to secure an additional $8 million to fund that program for the next 4 years. And we're still, kind of working on that. And I think we were a big part of the capital access bill that passed, which was, an additional, I think, 30 million. And so I think one of the reasons why we have really seen so much success is that we're able to kind of reach, other communities of color, other underserved populations, and really partner with them in intentional ways to create a lot of opportunity for not only the businesses that are typically served, entrepreneurs that are typically served with these dollars, but really, try to focus on folks that have been overlooked and underserved and kind of forgotten. And I think that coalition work has been, the RISE Collective has more members in addition to our Community Chamber Coalition, but we're also still looking ahead at, some place-based solutions to creating economic hubs in our region and areas for entrepreneurship that kind of go beyond, just this traditional way of, grow the business to get the capital in their hands, and then, kind of hope that they'll be able to take that to the next level. Really wanting to be intentional about the way that we're helping businesses grow, making sure that they're protected, that they understand the systems and understand, the ways in which, we and our partners are able to serve. So we've been, on those front lines for many, many years, but I think in the last 3 years, we've really been able to lean on our partnerships and lean on our coalitions to be able to, have those dollars for our communities.
Would you talk a little bit too about the increased resource navigation you all have been able to put together? I think it's really cool getting to work beside you all as you help work together as multiple organizations to reach as many people as possible. When you aren't specifically offering something, you're able to send them to Nick Yahweh, for example, or something like that.
Yeah, that's been our model for a while, which is that we want the best resource for our entrepreneurs, whether we can provide it or not. I want our entrepreneurs to be able to access the best experts, the best technical assistance providers, the industry specific experts, and that's not always going to be us. And so we want to build strong partnerships with those organizations and those partners that are doing that work, that are able to provide those resources. And I think, in addition to that, we've really kind of leaned into a network of professional service providers that are majority Native owned businesses. And if they're not Native owned, then they're from other communities of color to be able to offer, those services to businesses also. We're really trying to kind of put money where our mouth is and recirculate these dollars into the businesses that are serving the businesses that we're seeking to serve. And that's happening all across the Northwest region.
Awesome. Okay, Tawny, do you want to talk about some of the successes from SCNHRC so far? There's plenty to talk about.
There is. I'm having a hard time narrowing it down, but to be honest, I'm just going to brag a little bit about the coalition's success in measuring. So ultimately, like I said earlier, I guess the main number we should be worrying about, right, is that we are actually increasing the number of Native families achieving home ownership. And just in the last 3 years, we have the coalition, according to the 2021 impact report, has more than doubled the number of Native families who have achieved home ownership, both in number and in dollar amount of loans. And so that is the one thing. We are making a difference. And I think, like Lakota said earlier, you can't necessarily say that all of those are necessarily a result of the coalition, but I think there's strong evidence to say that we're definitely a part of that success. The other thing that I liked, I'm real happy with our impact reports showing who's doing the lending in Indian country. Who is doing the mortgage loans specifically in our Native communities in South Dakota? It's the Native CDFIs, basically. And so we have data to show that it's consistently over 70% of the mortgage loans in our tribal communities in South Dakota are being done by the Native CDFIs. And also in some ways, who's not doing the lending, because there's not a single bank loan on here. There's not a single mortgage loan evidenced in these results that's coming from a bank. They're coming from the Native CDFIs, whether we're utilizing and I would argue either in portfolio type loans, or if we're using the USDA 502 direct, those numbers are increasing. Is that maybe started by a Native CDFI? The Native American direct loan product, which is the only VA product that's offered to our Native American veterans who are trying to acquire a mortgage on trust land. Those are normally started with our Native CDFIs. So basically, I like that because our Native CDFIs need investment, cut to the chase, which works, then in, coordination with the efforts of the Mountain Plains that Lakota has moving. It really all comes down to one thing, whether it's for business lending or mortgage lending, just generally asset building and wealth creation in our Native communities, invest in our Native CDFIs. The other thing I like about our impact numbers in comparing them is how we can see the need for subsidy and down payment assistance, not only in the dollar amounts that we're utilizing to make mortgage lending and homeownership possible in our Native communities, the sources, the amounts, and at the rates, the utilization rates. So I think that's important. And I love the fact that we have all of this available to show potential funders, and we rely heavily on foundation support for a lot of those products. So that's useful. Then the other bigger picture successes, of course, is definitely around our policy initiatives, and hopefully, like I said, it's kind of funny how, well, it's not funny, it's intentional, honestly, but it's almost a happy accident, if you will, that Elsie Meeks is the one who brought us together, right? With the sole purpose of just increasing those 502 the 502 direct loans that were being approved and utilized. And it's through that, us always working towards making that the goal, and many years of working with the rural development and OMB and everybody else, and finally with our leadership at the federal level, specifically Senator Rounds and Senator Smith, that we are very, very close to achieving that success through the what is now going to become permanent through the 502 single family housing direct loan relending program for Native Americans. And I think, Lakota, you could probably speak more to this, because it is through the success of the pilot program where the rural development 502 monies were made available to 2 Native CDFIs in South Dakota, one of which is 4 bands, and the success that they had in deploying $2 million in a matter of 18 months or so. Lakota, I mean, less than a year. You guys deployed more mortgage loans than rural development had over 10 years. So it is in those local Native CDFIs in South Dakota, Mazaska, and 4 bands having that kind of success to demonstrate, first of all, the demand in our communities, the pipeline that we have, but also, you know, our ability through relationships and the technical assistance, what we can get done when we have access to that loan capital. And so I am thrilled that we are very close to seeing the passage of this, so that we can now, this product could be offered to all of Indian country. We have other successes around, very close to success, and working with Senator Rounds for, again, probably going on 5 years to make some much needed changes to the Native American direct loan product, like I talked about earlier, offered by the VA, mostly just in how our Native American veterans really don't have access to the technical assistance. They don't have access to that product at all because of the remote location of most of our veterans, and the fact that VA and ADL loan is only accessible through regional loan centers, sometimes many states away. So they've worked with the veterans that have succeeded in utilizing it, have gone through, again, our Native CDFIs to access that product so that we can help them navigate the process. But much needed changes being recommended with that we hopefully will see become law as well.
And how often are you utilizing the coalition's data? How often are you guys using it to do some of this like advocacy and policy work? How often do you have to pull that out and present it somewhere?
And how nice it is to have, right? Just something that you can pass on to whoever you're talking to share those impact numbers. But especially Lakota, and you can speak more to this too, the success that you've seen, that we've seen with the 502 relending, that has been the key to helping us move that bill this far.
Yeah, I think, honestly, what I would say, the power of coalitions and collectives and impact collection through a coalition model is that it helps share a narrative about Native CDFIs. So if Tani's on a national panel, she's going to talk about the successes of the coalition, whether it's her data or not. Similarly for me at the Mountain Plains Regional Coalition, and what that's done is help move a policy change that would have taken decades. Honestly, if I had to solely do that and push that through Congress and talk to my congressman, that would take a lot longer than what the coalition has been able to achieve, because you've got multiple voices sharing the same story. And that's the power of data storytelling, right, through a coalition and collective, is it shares our time frame, because all of us are busy, advocating on different platforms, and it takes it and keeps pushing the same story forward. So oftentimes if a new piece of legislation or a new ears are needing to hear the data, the coalition will push out an email to the members and say, hey, can you just update these numbers in a table? Like, here's what we had the last time you reported it. Can you just update it as of today and then pop it in there? And then they take off with it and they advocate for us, and we get to continue doing the work. But then you've got that arm of the coalition that is managing the policy change, and that is such a relief. And I think that's the main storyline here, is the power of collaboratives doing that for us, so that we're not constantly having to do everything and be an expert in every space and be present at every talking point. So
those are all my questions. Before we open it up to having an open conversation with everyone here, do either of you three have any closing remarks that you want to make? Awesome. So I know that there are some other, kind of networks in the room here. I know Ted and Janelle are part of a network for the Northwest. I think there was a couple others that I saw too. So I don't know if Ted, Janelle, or if Fern used to be over in Wisconsin, so I don't know if any of you want to add anything to this conversation before we do some Q&A with everyone. Put you on the spot.
I never have much to say, so.
I don't believe that. Well, we can open it up to Q&A. Would be happy to hear more from anyone else who is going to do this work or has been doing this work. If anyone has any questions or anything else to add.
I can just say a few comments too, just to piggyback on what Lakota mentioned about the power of the collective and the power of multiple data sets in the same region, and the policy work that underscores all of the coalition building and coalition work that most of our organizations achieve. That's really truly the essence of coalition building and where the work gets done, and that paves the way for a lot of the initiatives and funding and investments, etc. Even the metrics and the data that gets put out there, that also kind of ties in with that as well. But yeah, I think that all of you ladies have mentioned some key highlight of the work that coalitions do. In Wisconsin, we've done a lot of that too at the state level, even with tribes, working with tribes and really trying to educate them about CDFIs, about our industry, just all of the litany that we go through in our daily work as coalitions and CDFIs. And in the sense that, policy and advocacy and education are, to me, the pillars of really paving the way for our jobs to be easier. And then when you throw in data with it, that's like the magic ingredient. So just cheers to all of you ladies for talking about your coalitions and huge work that everyone does.
Well, if there's not any other questions or anything, I'll just thank our panelists here for joining us. And I wanted to mention as well that the closing plenary for capital access is going to build up on this conversation as well. We talked a lot about kind of data and impact today, and the closing plenary will talk a little bit more broadly about these coalitions, some of which will be there. So definitely catch that on Thursday so that you can hear more about the work that everyone is doing. And other than that, I think we can wrap up a little early unless anyone has anything else to add.
Then we'll take silence. Take
Amber
silence as a wrap.
Yeah.
I do just want to mention, thank you for the panelists. Thank you, Alyssa, for moderating. And thank you for mentioning one of the plenaries. But I want to invite you all to the 3:15 Mountain Time plenary. So we have about 45 minutes. It's going to be increasing capital access through participation lending. So you definitely want to catch that. So just jump back into the platform, click on the link, and we will see you at 3:15. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.